Today, I'm joined by Dr. Toya Davis, a spiritual teacher, intuitive guide, and founder of the Chi Healing Institute. I hope I said that right. Is it? It
You
doesn't, I
did.
don't have to say CHI. No, Chi Healing Institute. Latoya helps high achieving women break through internal limitations, reconnect with their intuition, and align with their soul's divine assignment. She's a three-time best-selling author with a gift for making spiritual concepts both grounded and transformational. Latoya blends ancient wisdom with modern clarity. And today, she'll be sharing powerful insights on reclaiming your soul path and living in full energetic alignment. Latoya, thank you so much for joining
Yeah,
me.
thank
I'm
you.
really looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I was just saying off air, I've watched some of your YouTube videos in preparation for our call today, and yeah, I watched one video and I had so many notes, so I don't think that we're going to be short of things to talk about. And we've both acknowledged that we kind of might. Oh, there's a little squeak there. I've got some building maintenance going on, so we'll try and avoid that going into the recording as much as possible. Sorry that we both kind of meander. Oh, there it goes again. Um, do you want to share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get stuck into some of the things?
Yes. So big picture, you kind of tapped on or touched on those ideas. And I think what's really important for me is I always say it's like depending on the day you ask me is kind of where I'm leaning into. I am just coming back from almost 2 months in Brazil. Started there with a retreat, two retreats that I had, and then just kind of stayed. And so coming back from that, like being there, I always really get to tap into like who I am. And I feel like Brazil for me is like the place where I just get to show up the most authentic and live and be and just all of the things. And so I think what's bubbling up for me today to talk about is that although I do a lot of things, right? So I do Akashic Records work, I do ancestral lineage healing, I do Reiki, study crystals, study herbs. For me, at the core of everything that I do, it's really about helping people to like shed the programs, right? It's like really letting people, helping people to understand what it is to show up and be your most authentic self and to live that freely. I'm from Miami, Florida, and I always say, growing up in Miami during the time that I grew up, in order to get out of there, you really had to develop a personality and this thing that wasn't yours, but you had to in order to, for safety, in order for all of the things. And it wasn't until I got into college, right, that I even started to be like, wait a minute, that's not mine. This is hindering me. And then I got married and that started to like, ripple out even farther. And so now I am really just passionate about helping people identify where they are not showing up in the best and highest version of themselves. However, whatever modality, I'm using to help people get there.
Wow, yeah, that's like a topic in itself, isn't it? Like that whole layering of what our human experience is, and I've definitely been going through a bit of that, and I think we do through different parts of our lives. Um,
Mhm.
what's mine? What's not? Why do I
Yes.
believe that? A really simple example. My son, he's nearly 11. He wanted to get his
Mhm.
ear pierced. I'm not really that into it. But then and my husband was like, oh, yeah, not really. Although our daughter, who's younger, has her ears pierced twice. And I'm kind of like, but where does that come from?
Yes.
Is that really what we believe?
Yes.
And that's a really simple example of how, like, those societal norms and the things that we've been taught and
Yes.
fed
Yes.
become just normal
Yes.
until you question them.
Till you question them. And I believe that children are a part of that, like that mirror, right? If you're aware enough to be able to allow that type of reflection, right? I do believe that children are a part of that mirror that really makes you question, wait, what is this? Why is this? Why am I doing this? Because no, yeah, my kids, they definitely bring it. They're the ones I'm like, wait, why did I say that? Give me a second. Let me come back to you and tell you how I really feel, you know? Yes.
Yeah, I had my kids late in life. So I had the oldest one when I was 40, the second one when I was nearly 42. And I think that I really believe that they have been part of my midlife awakening journey
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
they have given me a completely different perspective on life and just going through the motions. You know, even being able to see things through their eyes when they're young, you
Yeah.
have and see their fascination and their, you know, the dreamlike qualities that they have, like all of those things that are kind of part of our nature, but that
Yes.
we lose through all of that conditioning and that societal
Exactly.
stuff.
Exactly.
All right, let's start by talking about success because you work with high achieving women
Hmm.
specifically. So
Hmm.
can you kind of tell us what high achieving looks like
Yes.
to start?
Um, yes. And I've actually been grappling with this term lately, right? Because again, all things are fluid, right? We are where we are. Um, and what I realize is that I think one, we are our own best client, right? So when I look at my life, I was always the person who did all of the things. Things came easy. I graduated at the top of my class, got scholarships for school, was in the bed, like all of the things. You name it, I did it. And I didn't necessarily have to um, work hard to make it happen, right? It was programmed in me that I was going to do these things. And so then I did those things, right? I didn't question it. I just kind of followed the script. And so as I started to work and notice who my clients were, right, and the people that I was attracting, I was like, wait, we're all the same. Right? We've all done the same things. We've gone to school, we've gotten the degrees, we've gotten the jobs, we've done all of these things, not because necessarily it was a conscious, like, and this is what I'm going after, but because we were following the program, right, of what you're supposed to do. And what I realized was that the underlying kind of similarity or the underlying energy in all of this was um, that success was important from an external, like there was an external success that was important, but it didn't necessarily reflect an internal happiness. And
Mm.
so when I'm talking about high achieving women, and primarily the people that I work with, and I do work with men, right? They come as well, but primarily I do focus on women. What I the push or the pull or the things that we explore is what does success actually look like, right? What are we actually using to measure success? Are we using the things that actually feel good? Because that's my goal, to get us to a life that lights us up from the inside out. Or are we using those markers that we've been taught as success? And most times we're using those external markers for success. So I hope I answered the question. I can.
You totally did. And yes, you totally did. So my next question was, does achievement equal happiness? And you've kind of answered that one already. So yeah, I'm really interested in this because when I read your biography and it said high achieving, I was like, and I was writing it down. I thought, oh, high achieving, what does that mean? Because initially I thought high achieving woman, specifically corporate. That's the thing that came to my mind. But and I'm not corporate, but I'm a high achieving woman. I was at school, I was top of the class, I got awards, you know, I went to, in my first jobs, I received awards for the best staff member, you know, and I've competed in CrossFit, like, so I'm one of them.
Yes.
And interestingly, I have witnessed in myself recently, I'm 51, and I've witnessed in myself in recent years, probably in the last couple of years, when I speak to my dad, who's in the UK, every week, and he asks me, what have you been doing? I feel like I need to, I feel like if I haven't been doing anything out of the ordinary, that I haven't succeeded and that I'm letting him down. And that's
Yeah.
been a real eye opener for me.
And I think that that is the key, right? That is and just again, going back to our children are our mirrors,
Mm,
right? I look at my youngest daughter and I'm like, she is me. And so, like, her drive to excel in everything
mm.
and the like, I don't really need to do sleep because I can do 50 things at one time. You can, right? But you don't need to. It's okay to stop and to sit down and to take a nap and to do all of the things. And I think that when you just talked about when your dad calls, it's like when someone's like, well, what'd you do? And you're like, well, these are the things, like, but yeah, no, but what did a friend of mine one day asked me, how do you feel? And I said something standard, like some standard answer. He was like, no, that's not what I asked you. I asked you, how do you feel?
Mm.
And I was like, no, but that is. And I realized that no, I was in autopilot, right? Just like in everything else, I was in autopilot. I was following the script. And how dare something like not fit nicely into the compartment, I so you asked how like about the happiness and the success and like do those two things equate?
Mm.
And I tell the story of like when I really locked in that something was wrong, right? So I used to I'm a dancer, been dancing since I was 3, teaching dance. I always say I've taught dance longer than I've done anything else. I started teaching dance when I was 15 years old. And I owned a dance studio when I was maybe 21. I opened a dance studio. Um, so I had my own dance studio. I had a dance company. I was in school working on my PhD, was married. So all of the things were happening, right? We had a house. My then husband at the time had a great job. We were doing things in the community. It all looked great. And then I had kids and or a child because I didn't have them at the same time. Had a child. And I remember one day thinking to myself, like, if my children or if my child came to me and was like in this same cycle, like, would I be happy for her? I was like, I wouldn't. I wouldn't because I'm doing these things. And again, there's this external thing and there's momentary happiness. When I was at the dance studio, it was fab. I love my students. I love the parents. When I was doing this thing, that too was great. Right. But when all of those things were gone, how did I feel? Going back to the guy's question, how did I feel? And I was like, wait, this doesn't feel good. And so for me, I recognize that children will always do what they see. So regardless of what I said to them, like regardless of no, it's okay, don't know, they follow what they see. And I was like, I can't fake being happy because they're also little sponge empaths, right? So she's gonna feel if I'm like fake. And so I was like, no, I have to make real wholesale changes. If I want the future generations to be happy, I have to also figure out what is that block between this success and the happiness and figure out how to bring those two things together.
Wow. I was just thinking when you were describing that story of like your success in inverted commas versus happiness and were you happy? Just on a high level, before we get into more detail, did you kind of have you dug deep? I'm sure you have dug deep enough now that you know what the seed of that happiness is, like what that looks like for you.
Yes.
Okay.
And so this brings us to the Akashic Records, right?
Okay, cool.
I think that I always say the Akashic Records are the one thing that really shifted my ability to go deep, like you said, right? Prior to that, I had already been around or aware of, I've been a spiritual person my whole life. I can't separate that aspect of myself, right? Granted, I didn't know exactly what or how because I didn't grow up in that as a culture. Um, and when I got into college and started dating someone who introduced me to African traditional spirituality, then my understanding of like, oh, spirit, downloads, intuition, like all of those things started to come together. But in that process, again, now in retrospect, right, I still recognize that there was almost a like an external, there was a barrier, right? There was the you and the spirit, and then it goes this way. Like there are these protocols, there are these steps, all of these things. When I started to study the Akashic Records, the focus shifted to the soul. And the idea of the soul was not something that I had ever consciously thought of. You know, I'm sure that it had been mentioned. I'm sure that I wasn't oblivious to it, but to say that I am understanding myself as a soul, as a being that continues to come into this reality and has experiences, and those experiences continue to kind of build upon each other. And as a soul, I have agency. Like, wait, I've made some choices. I chose to do this thing. I chose to have this experience. Wait, this was a lesson that I wanted to learn, right? Just for me getting that or flipping kind of how I was experiencing life through that lens really started to shift how I showed up and how I was able to understand myself. So, doing the Akashic Record work or being introduced to the Akashic Records and understanding myself at soul level made me question all of the things. And in that, I got to understand like what the true seed of my happiness is. And I think that this comes into we all have a soul blueprint.
Mm.
And a part of our soul blueprint is this aspect that I call an energetic archetype. And essentially, that is how you were designed, or kind of at soul level, how you were kind of wired to, I like to say, be or do or show up, right? And I think when you are able to live in that energy, that is where your true happiness is, right? Because now you're in flow, you're in alignment, everything is in ease. And so once I understood what my energetic archetype was, I was able to release all of the things that didn't support that. And now I'm like, yes, I'm good. Doesn't matter, literally doesn't matter what else is happening. I can always find my center and I'm good.
I love that. It's a process though, isn't it? I want to get
Yes.
into more detail about the Akashic Records, but yeah, just in with that process of like, and you sort of mentioned this when you first discovered or started exploring spirituality, but even, well, my experience has been anyway, that you know that this is you, you see your blueprint, you understand your blueprint, but actually embodying it, that's a process, isn't it? Because of all of the conditioning and all of
Which is
the what will other
work.
people think of me?
Yes, yes. So I just resigned from my job.
Oh, congratulations. I think that's always a good thing.
At the end of the month. And I knew that I needed to do it,
Mm,
right? My spirit had already said we're not congruent anymore, right? But the conditioning. So I tell this to say, even when you're doing the work and when you know the work and when you teach the work, right? You still have to, like, it still comes back to be like, wait a minute, are we truly doing what we're saying? Because I stayed a lot longer because of, no, you're at a university, right? No, everybody's the goal when you have in academia is to be at a top tier university. You have this job. People in my department literally retire from there. Like there was
okay.
someone who had just retired from 39 years of being in my department. And then the person before that was at like 30 years, right? So like this is it's secure. You get a check every 2 weeks, like all of the things. And so that kept me, that programming, that condition, all of that, the fear, all of that kept me longer than I needed to be. But the reality was it had become completely incongruent, right? My spirit didn't feel good. And I had to say to myself, either you can stay in this space and continue to uphold these paradigms that aren't yours, right? Continue to look like look on paper like it feels good and not be happy. But what you're losing from not making the choice to be authentic and be in alignment is far greater than anything you can count, right? Or that you can quantify. And so when I made the choice to leave, like again, my spirit now is like, yes, we're free. Well, I don't know what's happening, but yes.
Love it. I was talking to my husband the other day about this thing because you sometimes I feel like sometimes you can see what's happening in your life, like for example, you being at university, and you can know that this is not right.
Mhm,
If you're watching kind of from the outside,
yeah,
and you know that it's not right, but it's almost like you have to live out. You still have to live out that bit,
yeah,
even though you
yeah,
know that at the end you're going to do the thing. Like
yeah.
I know I'm gonna leave, but I still have to live out this experience
Mhm,
to learn the
mhm.
lesson. It's really
Yeah.
kind of fascinating, isn't it?
Yes. And you know what was when I started to tell a few people that I told, I was, and this again, this is that like the mind does something really crazy, right? And it's not real. Half the time, the things that the mind is telling us are not real things. So I had made this perception that people are going to be like, oh my gosh, you're crazy. What are you doing? Every single person that I told was like, I'm so proud of you. You're
Oh,
such an inspiration. Oh my gosh, the courage that that takes. You've given me inspiration to do blah, 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 blah. And I did not expect that, you know? And so, again, for me, that was just confirmation of like when you live in your truth and in your purpose, um, it shows. You don't have to, like, you don't have to work to be the thing, right? Because if when you are living in your truth, that ripple effect and how that plays itself out will do its part.
mm, yeah. Wow. That kind of, we are going to talk about the Akashic Records in more detail. But I would love for you to share, like, that's kind of taken us to that idea of alignment. But I'd love for you to um, start by sharing some of the telltale signs when we're not in alignment, because I think these can be like red flags for us. And yeah, once we kind of acknowledge them and go, actually, yeah, that sounds like me, or I'm having
Mhm,
that experience, then we might
mhm.
take steps to
Yes. I think an easy
move
one
forward.
is like the energy drain,
Okay.
right? You're going someplace or you're constantly around someone and it's like you could go and you're like, yes, my energy is up. And then you come back and you're like, oh, right. It's like that energy zap. It's like, why was that a zap for you? Right. Particularly if it's constant, because of course, we have moments and times and days and ebbs and flows, right? But if it is a thing that's consistent, then I say, let's take a look. Let's assess why is this happening? Um, Also, I believe that the soul never stops speaking to us, right? Our spirit is always trying to communicate us or trying to communicate the best and highest version of whatever it is. And so I believe that there's never a moment where we don't receive the internal, like, yeah, this isn't it anymore. But what happens is we suppress that. We don't listen, we kind of push it back, but the soul is persistent, right? The spirit is persistent. It keeps popping up. You might see something on TV, right? You might be thinking, oh gosh, if I could just start this ice cream truck. That's a really random example, but let's go with it, right? I could just start this ice cream truck. And then really randomly somebody calls and's like, hey, you want to go see this movie about, the founder of this ice cream company? So I feel like we start to get these signals that if we're tuned in, be like, wait a minute, that's really in alignment, or that's really kind of these little breadcrumbs that is feeding this thing that my spirit is also telling me. Maybe I
Mm,
should, take a look at this. And I think that sometimes we just dismiss those things because we dismiss that initial urge. Another thing is, so we talked about energy, like the energy drain, um, kind of, we'll call
okay.
synchronicities that align with what the spirit is kind of bubbling up for us. Also, like the loss of zest or zeal for something, you know, because all things sometimes they start out in alignment, right? A lot of times they start out in alignment, but because we are continuing to evolve and grow, the ability for something to shift, you know, is easy. And so it's like, yes, when I started this, I was gung-ho and I was excited. And now it doesn't feel good. And with that one out there, I'm being cautioned to bring up right now, that is not all the time. Like we don't have to make a wholesale change, right? Going back to the job that I had, let's just say that I experienced the energy drain, which I did. I experienced the spirit telling me all of those things. But let's say I still had the zest and the zeal for like my students, which I do, right? I love showing up in class. I love doing all of those things. One way that I could have possibly worked to get into alignment versus like the wholesale, throw the whole thing away, was figuring out, okay, what part of this still feels good? The part that still feels good is showing up for the students. Okay, that part still feels good. Okay, how can I do more of this and lose these other things that don't feel good? Can I activate my voice, right? So that I am able to advocate to do more of this to lose these other things. And so sometimes getting into alignment isn't about this whole big radical shift, because sometimes people think that that's what it has to be, and then it becomes frightening, right? So it doesn't have to be this really big radical shift. Sometimes it literally is just saying, what about this still feels good?
Mm,
And how can I amplify this? What about this doesn't feel good? And what steps can I take to release this, remove this, or shift how I have to show up for these things?
mm. And again, it takes time or a conscious awareness, doesn't it?
Yes.
But yeah, we can get caught up in the day to day and those cycles of like, well, I have to go to work. I can't afford not to give up my job. But then you're waking
Yes.
up and you're uh, dreading it, feeling
Yes.
worried, anxious.
Yes.
Yeah, potentially. If
Yes.
you go,
Awareness is the always the first step. No
mm,
matter what we're talking about, awareness is always going to be the first step, right? And then what you do with the awareness is where we start to get into the nitty gritty of it, right? It's like I can be aware and then still choose not
yeah,
to do anything. I can be aware and systematically, right? Small steps, figure out how I'm going to address this. I can be aware and just, you know, I always say I'm team, I'll jump and I'll figure it out later. Hence, no job right now. Because I trust the universe is going to catch me like 1000% of the time. So I don't have that fear, you know, that is there. But not there. I always say don't do that unless you're clear. You know, it's nothing wrong with doing the small steps. You know, we don't write a book in a day, right? We write it line by line. You write the first line, which makes a paragraph, which makes a page, and there's nothing wrong with that approach. I think what happens though is sometimes we feel like going back to the has to be this big thing, and then we get stuck into paralysis, right? Or the task feels so big and so daunting that we end up just kind of staying where we are. And I think that the nervous system and the ego, like all of that, the job is to keep us safe, right? And so when we do something or have a thought or do these things that the perception is, wait a minute, if we take these actions, this is unsafe, then we automatically can kind of trigger a response that keeps us locked into the place. And so again, I think it's important that awareness of like, how do I process? How do I best make change? Right? Bit by bit, small pieces, all of that I think is perfectly fine and a healthy way to shift into alignment.
yeah, yeah. Great tips. I'm curious. Excuse me. Excuse me about your recent res resigning. Is that what we call it? Resignation. That's the word. Your recent resignation. The one thing that I find challenging, because when I was younger, before I was married, before I had kids, I did things. I was like, I'm going to go to Australia to live, right? I did these big things, just like dropped everything. I'm going. But now I feel very responsible for taking into consideration the others in my life. And you're a mum of two. Can you describe to us how you overcame that?
Yes, yes. So one of the things that I always say to myself is that faith and fear can't live in the same place. Either you're faithful or you're fearful, right? And so when I find myself stuck in operating from the place of fear, because that's what that, oh wait, is this going to be, that's operating from the place of fear, I have to say or remind myself that one, I don't believe that any download or input, any vision or version of my life that I see that is great is outside of my ability to bring into reality, right? If I can see it, if I believe it, then that means that it's there for me to get to. And so that's the faithful part. Um, and I believe that because I do like a lot of work around, like quantum realities and timelines and all of that stuff, like I know that I can't be anchored into one thing trying to get to something else. Like the two are diametrically opposed, and I'm going to always shift down to the lower thing. And because faith and fear can't live together, I literally, that's what I tell myself. That's literally what I tell myself. Faith and fear can't live together. Are you faithful or are you fearful? And I think for me, because how I've raised my kids is we have very open communication. And, I say, this is what mommy's doing. And we talked about, all right, I'm going to make this choice. This is what this means for you all, right? The example that I gave them was, normally when you come to mommy and you say, mommy, can I have such and such? And I'll be like, oh, wait, you have to wait until Friday, which was payday. I was like, when you come to me now, I'm going to be like, oh, I don't know, right? I don't know when we can get that. And again, this goes back to how children are reflections, right? So one day I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm about to do this. What's going to happen with my kids? And my daughter said, mommy, it's okay. They weren't paying you enough for the stress anyway. And I was like, thank you, baby. You're right. They were not, and so I think that that was because my only fear is always my kids,
Mm,
right? It's like, are they going to be okay? But trust, I trust with like everything in me that I'm going to always land on my feet.
amazing. I love that. It's an interesting pull, isn't it? Like this when because I don't know if all women go through this. I certainly am experiencing it right now. That pull between the current, but knowing that there's something more, that there's something not quite in alignment. Yeah, it's a pull. Does everyone go for the pull, I guess, is like towards the being in alignment, or do some people just stay in the
Some people
normal?
definitely just stay in the norm, but I think this goes back to, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it goes back to the programming and the conditioning, right? The programming and the conditioning says, I have, particularly as women, right? I have to make sure that the kids are taken care of and the this and the all of these things. And I say they are their own individual souls with their own unique experiences and gifts and lessons and all of that stuff. And I trust that us collectively can move through this thing and navigate, for them. I trust that I have taught them um, enough to be able to weather whatever this storm is, right? I'm like, my children don't have like a sense of entitlement. Like, I've raised them to be really good individuals. And so, whatever the transition looks like, I trust that they can be along for the ride. And I think what happens is a lot of, again, for women, we fall into the guilt of even like I'm not cooking, I'm not coming home and cooking dinner, and I'm not at all of this, and I'm not all of this, but all of that is conditioning. I remember when I first separated from my husband or ex-husband, we moved to Tallahassee. Me and the kids moved to Tallahassee, and I had a an au pair. So someone who comes and they were living with me, and somebody tried to guilt me into like, why did I have this person coming to stay with me? And like, why couldn't I raise my own kids? And I was like, first of all, I do, right? But we have just moved, I have just uprooted them from everything that they know. We're in a new place. I'm starting a new job that's going to require me to be here and be active. For me, what makes sense is that I know that my children are in a stable environment with somebody who can be there for them. And in that moment, I realized like I almost stopped talking to that person because I was like, how dare you judge me for what I'm doing? It was a guy. How dare you judge me for how I'm choosing to make sure that my children are good? But I realized in that moment that everybody has an opinion on what they think is the best way. And if I have to try to like meet everybody's expectation of what they think is right, I'm never going to be able to get to the life that I want. I check in with the kids. Hey, this is what we're doing. Okay, great. Yes. They share their concerns, right? And that's how I live. And so I think all of it is programming. All of it
Mm,
is programming. And as long as you can say to yourself, what program am I operating in right now? And be able to question and figure out where the program comes from. And do you really believe that?
yeah,
Then that's where the work starts.
totally. And that is really a really great segue, I think, because what you just described with your daughters and the conditioning that is so ingrained that you're actually healing that ancestral wound by
Yes.
changing the story. So that kind of takes us into that ancestral healing and the Akashic Records. I think they're connected. I hope they're connected.
We can
So,
make them.
can you do? I have had a couple of other guests on that have kind of touched on it briefly, but we haven't gone into a great amount of detail. And I'm still kind of grasping what the Akashic Records are. My perception is that every possibility exists all the time,
Mhm.
and that so we can basically choose any of those, and they're everywhere.
Mhm.
That's about as far as I can go
That's
with it. Is that kind of a bit
it.
on the right track?
So big picture overview, I always like to say. So the Akashic records are an energetic field. And why I lean in with that idea that it's an energetic field is because then it takes people out of the space of like, it's this spiritual thing, right? Or you have to have some type of gift or this thing, right?
Okay, yeah.
If we believe that everything in the world is energy, which it is, like we don't have to work hard to believe that it's a fact, right? Everything is energy. And the way that energy exists is we've learned energy is not created. It cannot be like it is once it is there, it just continues to have different variations and permutations, right? But the energy itself is there. So the Akashic records are an energetic field. And what you're doing when you're accessing the Akashic records, I like to say, um, think of universal consciousness, right? So in universal consciousness, everything is just happening and swirling. And what the records does is it like compacts it into like a slice or a sliver in a way that the mind can kind of grasp it and make sense of it, right? So it kind of collapses all of the particles, all of the energy, all of the stuff. It collapses it down into this like one field of thought. And in this field of thought, all past, present, future possibilities exist. The idea that I don't know, no one has ever seen like Men in Black 3.
I've never watched it.
No one's ever watched it because who watches the third part of a trilogy, right? But there was this guy, and I'm horrible with like remembering characters and stuff like that. But there was this guy or a character in Men in Black 3 where he was essentially like he for me is how I perceive what's happening in the world. So he would like let's say they were in the bar and in his mind, like he would say, okay, if somebody walks in and puts the cup down to the right, then we need to move left. If somebody comes in from the back door, then we need to go this way. So it's like he could, based on like what the step was, because he had all of the possibilities in his head, he could figure out like what the next thing needed to be based on the thing that preceded it, right? Because all possibilities exist all the time. And it is just about like what choice you make right here, right now, that kind of determines the ripple effect out. But I think the larger, because I don't, where I like to lean more into the Akashic Records for, again, it's kind of coming back to that soul level understanding,
Mm,
right? I think that in understanding that we are an infinite being that has had multiple incarnations with past life choices and all of those things, our ability to access that information helps us understand why I'm making this choice or why this pattern continues to repeat. Or, when I was in this relationship and I continued to go back and I continue, like what was happening here, right? So I find for me, the past stuff is a lot more beneficial to us healing and moving forward than kind of the future possibilities aspect.
sure. Because we kind of have to let the future unfold, don't we? And
Yes.
we can't control it necessarily. We can witness it, we can
Yes.
kind of step outside of ourselves and watch what's going on. But
Yes.
yeah, trying to control it, well, I've
Yes.
tried. You just don't go
Always
anywhere.
say. Yeah, I say for the future, one of the things that I say when I'm doing readings or people ask me about something, I say, given all things remaining the same,
Mm,
meaning your thought pattern is the same, the people that are involved, like nobody is doing any major shifts, right? Then we can kind of look a little bit past where we are. But people make quantum lifts and shifts in their mindset all the time.
yeah,
And that shift will drastically change the trajectory of something that you thought was going to happen. So
yeah, definitely. And your attitude as well, like your beliefs, all of those things can kind of shape well, they do shape our realities, don't they?
yes.
So before we move on, I'd love to talk about like how you use the Akashic Records for professional expansion with your clients. But you mentioned your own archetype, your soul archetype. Is that what the term
Energetic
you use?
archetype.
Energetic archetype. Can you describe to us what that looks like and how it came about?
Yes. So who is the person? I think is it Carolyn Mice? Um, oh, someone has like, yes, Carolyn Mice. She has like all of these archetypes,
Yeah.
widow, the maiden, right? And all of these things and how you show up. And so it's similar to that. I mean, and the idea of the archetype, I think, exists across kind of modalities or spectrums, right? So it's just like if you were this type of person or if you align with this, then this is how you show up. At soul level, when I'm looking at energetic archetypes, it's basically saying that there are these 9 ways that we are all kind of wired to be, right? We are either wired to kind of show up and present through the energy of love. We are wired and tapped in to be in alignment with the energy of wisdom, right? With truth. So, like, whatever these archetypes are, then say how you best show up in the world. So, I will use, for example, I'll use truth, right? So, someone who has an energetic archetype of truth says that, well, as the name suggests, right? Truth is really, really important to them at soul level. So what does that mean? That means that the soul is going to always be trying to get the truth to come out. These are people who, when you're saying one thing, their brain is telling them what you really mean,
Okay.
right? So the words are coming out, but they're already processing what's behind what they're seeing, what they're hearing, right? Because their soul is oriented to present the truth. Also, for them, because truth is important, These are those people who like it is really, really difficult for them to lie, right? Like, those like, oh, dang, did that come out of my mouth? And it's not conscious, right? It literally is just how the soul is oriented. And so once you kind of understand, but what happens is, so sorry. So what happens, let's say in alignment, right? I've learned that truth is my thing. So now when my brain is telling me, no, what she's saying isn't real. No, that's not really like I'm inclined to believe it a little bit more versus the conditioning that has taught me, no, if they're saying they're smiling, they've shown up, what they're saying is right, right? So I've learned to suppress my own internal knowing because everything has taught me to believe these things externally, right? Or I've gotten in trouble so much for saying the things that are coming up that now I don't say anything. So now I'm not living in my soul, my energetic archetype, because I'm afraid of sharing that. And what happens when we do that, that's how we push ourselves further and further out of alignment. We no longer are able to be in that ease and in that grace. And so I think one of the beauties of understanding what your energetic archetype is that it gives you that strength, it gives you that power to be like, wait, no, I'm not crazy. I get to I get to show up like this. No, this is how I perceive and how I receive information. And that is probably one of the biggest like gifts. Like when of all the different types of readings and the sessions and all of the stuff that I do, I think that giving people that, like I've had people cry from like what they've had to suppress and how they've had to shift from growing up because that was how they were naturally and everybody was like, no, you can't do that, no, don't that. And so they learned to adapt, but it never felt good. And so just me saying, no, your soul is wired for you to show up like that, like breaks something in them, that has been really, really beautiful to watch.
Mm. What's your soul, your archetype? Your
um Mine is freedom, hence
Oh,
being at the
nice.
job that doesn't work, right?
Yes.
So we all have kind of like a combination of well, let me not say it like that. Um we all have a dominant one,
Yeah.
right? Meaning that this particular one carries us most. But sometimes people can have two that are really, really close to each other. And so they kind of, work in tandem. And so truth one of my is actually one of my energetic archetypes, but my other one is freedom. Right. And so being in situations where I feel caged, where I don't get to where I feel like I'm being dictated. Let me tell micromanaging me, even if it's not me watching you micromanage somebody else really just irks my whole spirit, right? But that so for me, the choice to leave was like you're not like the abundance, the flow will never come to you because you were literally going against
Mm.
who you are at soul level. So yeah.
Really interesting that you use those two words because truth is one that I feel is quite relevant for me, that word truth. And part of my journey has been finding my own truth, the truth of who I am amid, beyond the conditioning.
Yeah.
And the second thing, I stopped drinking alcohol about 3.5 years ago. I was just like a glass of wine every evening kind of girl, and it was like this little niggling. You need to stop. You need to stop. You need to stop. Always, always. And I did. I didn't know why. But when people ask me, "What does it feel like?" and the word I use is, "It feels like freedom."
Mm.
And freedom comes and has shown up in a number of ways. But those two words feel very relevant to me, and so that was kind of cool that they're your two words.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that also for me, because I do have experience in like multiple, I think all so like astrology, human design, like I think
Mm,
all of those things, if you're going to someone that's good, like the information should overlap, right?
sure,
The
exactly.
perspective that is coming from is going to be different. right? So when you're in the
Yes.
Akashic Records, the information is coming from soul level, right? So the information, the perspective is different, but there should be like themes that are
Yes.
consistent. And so when I got into the Akashic Records and I started studying this and this idea of truth came out, I really had to laugh because so I'm an initiated priestess in the Sheshe, which is like out of the Yoruba people. And we do these things, they're called itas, right? So an ita is when you become initiated, they basically give you like a life reading, right? And it's like these this is how you are, this is what you came here to do in this life, and this is what you shouldn't do, and this is like all of the things. And so we have these things that are called taboos. And a taboo is something that you don't do. And my taboo, so this was before I got to this. My taboo is telling a lie, right? So I was like, okay, so bookmark that. Okay, great. Taboo, telling a lie. And for me, I was like, I don't really lie. Like I've always, even as a child, like my mother, you know how you'd be like, just tell them you're 12 so we can get this free meal. Like my mama would not do that to me because I'll be like, I am not 12, right? So that was never really my thing. So it was that. And then I got into another system, got another reading. And again, it was like, it is so important for you to always tell the truth. And this two completely different systems, right? They're saying the same thing. And then when I got into this and got my energetic archetype and it was like truth, I was like, it makes sense, right? So there should always be this layering of, depth and understanding as we continue in this work.
Definitely. I love that. That's really affirming, actually. So how does someone get their archetype? Is there do you kind of do an intuitive reading to help someone determine their own archetypes?
Yes. So I do what's called for that particular thing, I do a soul blueprint reading. A soul blueprint reading, I'm looking at five or six like kind of key things that are, I like to say the blueprint are those things that do not change. Right. So we just talked about kind of that realm of possibilities. Today I make this choice. I learned this lesson, right? So those things are ever shifting, but then there are aspects of us that are going to be consistent, right? What were the life lessons that I wanted to work through in this lifetime? That energetic archetype, my soul group, which is going to bring kind of like my innate skills and talents and gifts, right? So those things. So I do a soul blueprint reading in the Akashic Records. And I did, and I go back and forth with this thing because I'm like, no, the Akashic Records are for everybody. Anybody can tap into the Akashic Records, and you absolutely can. So anybody that tells you that you can't is not, it's not a true statement. The Akashic Records are for everyone, but there are definitely certain styles and types of, readings and informations and sessions that you learn and you study and you do. So the Soul Blueprint is one of the readings that I offer. And like I said, I'm looking for those particular things to help you understand who you are at soul level.
Wow. And what sort of transformation? Let's talk about transformation. What sort of transformations have you seen with the people that you've worked with? We love a transformation.
Yes. Yes. And they're so varied, right? I'm trying to figure out what's coming up to the top of my mind right now. Actually, um, this one is because we've talked about women in empowerment, but the one that's coming to my mind right now is actually about a couple. Um, And I don't know why it's bubbling up, but we're sharing it. So in relationships, right, often part of what happens is, again, we have to remember we are two individual souls that are coming together that are trying to, be in harmony with each other. But we've made our own life lessons that we wanted to work through. And yes, we made choices about I'm going to meet this person to have this particular lesson. So I was originally working with this woman who came to me for her own personal growth. She realized that she was repeating patterns of like not using her, like, kind of shrinking, in space where there was conflict. She wouldn't, even though she would really feel a particular way, she wouldn't ever really voice it. So she would just kind of go with the flow. And it was happening at work, it was happening at home, it was happening in her familial, relationships. And so she really wanted to shift that. And so that's what we were working on. And her husband noticed like the changes in the shifts that were happening with her. And so then he came to me. And he came because he wanted, or he realized that he wanted to process some trauma that had happened to him when he was younger, right? And it had to deal with men and women relationships, right? And he was like, I feel like this is impacting how I am able to interact with my wife. So then we did the work. And so now he's healing. The important part of this is that both people were taking individual responsibility for their own collective healing, right? Or their own collective work. So they're both doing the work. And then they said, we want to do a session together. And I said, okay, great, let's do it. And I had not heard from them after we did our session together, right? So I don't know. Every now and then somebody sends me an email, but I taught a master class a few months back. And at the end of the class, they stayed on and they said, we just wanted to tell you that our relationship is so much better. Like he talked for like 15 minutes about like the transformation and how I really helped save their marriage. And like I wasn't expecting that because this class was about ancestors and and here they were. And so for me, it was like this thing of you never know how the energy is going to unwind itself, right? When you kind of start doing the work, you never really know those things. I've had people who in jobs, so speaking of success, right, who have been able to kind of break the mindset of this is what I am worth, right? So accepting the smaller job, accepting the smaller pay, accepting all of those things, right? And really being able to identify why that was there, what that operation was from, and shifting that. I've had people, be able to change jobs, get more money, work less, right? All of those things. And this one is coming up. This is the last one. A lot of my clients, so although I work with high achieving women, we discovered that that can be across any spectrum. I work with a lot of like spiritual coaches and, light workers and energy workers. And a lot of us, and I include myself in this, right? A lot of us are dealing with a past life vow or contract that prevents us from wanting to charge for spiritual services, right? There is a program or a contract that a lot of us are locked into that makes it really feel like we're doing a disservice when we are asking for money. And so because of that, people show up and they overgive, they don't ask for money, they, oh, whatever you want to offer me, like all of those things. And so I think a lot of, if I had to say like, there's been like been able to really provide that consistent transformation. It is definitely in that realm of getting people to kind of unloose that vow and that contract that they have.
Amazing. Sounds really cool. Love it. I'm just going to flag that the builders have seen that it's time that they can start banging, and so they've started banging. So I'm going to ask you one more question because I think this
Yeah.
is a really beautiful way for us to close. I've loved everything that we've talked about, and we've not ticked off half the things that I had written on my list, but that's okay because it's all been amazing. So, one thing that you say on your website is my work is rooted in one core truth. You are your own answer. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit to that as we head towards our close?
Yeah. I think that again, this conditioning, we have been taught that things external to us know better than us, right? In all of the ways, right? And again, particularly as women, we go to men for validation. When we're in the church, we go to the pastor or the preacher for acceptance. Like everything has to happen externally. And I believe that that's a disservice because, again, the soul is always trying to get us to the best and highest version of ourselves. And it's not to say that I can't talk to somebody else and say, hey, what do you think? But I don't need them to be the authority of my life, right? I believe that if we can center ourselves enough to trust that our soul wants the best for us, and we can give ourselves permission to listen and to tap into that. And then again, start taking small steps. I don't need us to, like all of us saying it's like, yes, and I believe everything. Just take small steps and see that, wait a minute, when I followed that nudge, nothing happened. Wait, and it actually turned out really, really well. Okay, let me do it again. And then eventually you realize that you have everything that you need internally, right? You're able to get the answers, you're able to trust all of the things.
Love it. Amazing. I've so loved our conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to share all of your details in our guest directory so that people can access your website, your YouTube, and you have got an event coming up, haven't you, in the next little while? So, do
Yeah.
you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I have a retreat that's happening. It's called The Power Within. I feel like the power within, embodying your soul's blueprint. Hi, we've talked about the soul's blueprint, embodying your soul's blueprint. And it is about helping you to kind of take away the fuzz and the noise so that you can really identify and understand who and how you were designed to be at soul level. And so it is a retreat that I use the Akashic Records to kind of help create the container and help people dive in and dig in. And it's important to note that you might not know how to use the Akashic Records, and that's fine because we go through that process, during the 3 days together. So that is October 10th through the 12th, and would love to have you.
Amazing. One more thing, and there is banging in the background, but it seems to be okay. Do you, we're in, I'm in Australia, and we do have listeners around the world, including America.
Yes.
But do you do any online retreats or courses that people from around the world can tap into as well?
Yes, the majority of my stuff is online. All of my classes are, let me, not all of them, because I started business during COVID. All right, so so you learn to adapt. So I have on-demand courses to learn how to do the Akashic Records, ancestral lineage healing, spiritual development. All of those are on demand. I do virtual conferences. I do summits. My retreats are, I do a virtual two virtual summits a year, one for the Akashic Records and one for it's called The Lion Liberated and Abundant. So those two are virtual summits. But all of my other retreats are in person, but I'm all over. So I have one in Costa Rica. I mentioned I just came back from Brazil. I actually only have one that's in the US, right? So I am online. Follow me, find all the things. I do sessions online. Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. That all sounds fantastic. I'm going to be tapping into your website and having a look around. And yeah, I really appreciate your time. It's been really amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.